In today's episode of Tory politicians lying on national TV and the news channels that help them do it, Sophy Ridge asked Michael Gov about Brexit.
She said, I ask myself all the time, was it the right thing to do? What are the downsides, do you think?
Now, for starters, it shouldn't require Tory politicians like Michael Gove to publicly ask themselves questions about Brexit for the news channels to start asking them questions about Brexit, because that in of itself is letting Tory politicians decide what gets talked about and when.
On balance, Brexit has been a significant success for this country.
Okay, let's hear what you got.
We wouldn't have had the vaccine rollout that was so successful if we'd been within the European Union.
Here's the UK medicines regulator explicitly saying that we approved the vaccine under EU rules, i.e. Brexit had nothing to do with it. Here's the European Medicines Agency saying they don't control which medicines EU countries choose to buy and roll out. And here's Slovakia and Hungary buying Russian-made vaccines that the EU hadn't even approved. And all of this has been public knowledge for literally years at this point, but does Sophy Ridge correct him? Does she fuck?
We wouldn't have a better method of supporting farmers that strengthens the environment as well as enhancing food production.
Not only have UK farmers had to burn over 40,000 pigs due to a lack of EU butchers because of Brexit, but the UK Food and Drink Association says Brexit has cost them over £2 billion. Does Sophy Ridge correct him? Does she fuck?
There are opportunities now that the Prime Minister is exploring, which will mean that more money can go into levelling up areas.
Literally seconds before they started talking about Brexit, Sophy Ridge herself said,
The per person spending gap between the North and London doubled between 2019 and 2021.
So she knows that the idea that Brexit is helping with regional inequality is total BS. Does she correct him? Does she fuck?
But I do acknowledge that there have been frictions, and as we resolve the situation in Northern Ireland, that some of the things that have been said and done haven't necessarily been perfectly pitched.
What does that even mean? Does that mean that when you were telling people that there wouldn't be any trade barriers between Northern Ireland and Great Britain, that wasn't perfectly pitched? Because that's an interesting way of saying we were lying. Northern Ireland doesn't have a functioning government specifically because of Michael Gove's Brexit. And who is he blaming for that?
And I don't want to sort of, put the blame on anyone particularly, but I do think, in retrospect, the way in which the European Union insisted on the protocol...
You signed up to the protocol and Boris Johnson said it was a great deal, though.
Congrats, the first bit of pushback, but it's so much worse than the fact that they won their election on that Brexit deal. The fabric of British society was torn apart between 2016 and 2019 around the argument as to whether or not the end product of Brexit, i.e. the new relationship with the EU, would actually be something that people want. And now Michael Gove, one of the main people behind Brexit, is now actively trying to renegotiate that relationship and even pass laws to override it. Specifically because the DUP, who represent a core part of that 52%, don't like this new relationship, which means that Michael Gove and Boris Johnson tore apart the fabric of British society on a lie. And the thing is, I can now categorically say that these news channels are choosing not to do their jobs on Brexit because we're in a cost of living crisis and the government's official data says that Brexit is doing more damage to our economy and therefore people's financial situations than COVID. And yet I managed to hold Michael Gove to account better on that with a selfie stick and a Samsung. And yet despite all of the above, Sky News allowed Michael Gove to say this with almost zero correction.
Brexit has been a significant success for this country.